Have you ever wondered if there's a logic, a kind of hidden structure to what we call madness? Well, today on The Explainer, we're stepping away from a purely medical view to dig into a really fascinating philosophical idea that madness isn't just a breakdown of the mind, but a journey into a totally different reality, one with its own rules, its own physics, and its own profound meaning.
To really wrap our heads around this, let's try a little thought experiment. Picture a machine, let's call it the Renius machine, and its only job is to flip your perception of the world, like you're seeing everything in a mirror. So who's wrong? You? The world? This quote really nails the question we're asking today. What if it's not about a broken person, but about a relationship with reality that's been completely turned on its head?
So keep that Renius machine in your mind's eye, okay? Because it's kind of our guide for this whole explainer. It really forces us to ask that huge question. What if madness isn't some defect inside a person, but a radical shift in the connection between that person and their world?
Right. So for our purposes today, we are looking at madness from a philosophical angle. So let's set aside the idea of it being just a brain disease or a total void of meaning. Instead, let's think of it as an alternate reality, a world with its own physics, its own way of thinking, and its own completely consistent internal structure.
Okay, so what is it actually like to step across that threshold into this alternate reality? Well, the first thing that changes is the most basic thing of all, your senses. It's often described as entering a land of light, a place where the world you know just kind of dissolves.
What's wild here is how perception becomes participatory. For some people, colors aren't just these passive things you see, they are active characters in some cosmic drama. Red isn't just a color anymore, it's an event. It's a masquerade that you're not just watching, but you're a part of.
For others, it's not so much a party as it is this overwhelming flood of astral light. It's described as this brilliant but cold light that completely erases all the shadows, dissolves all the boundaries, and flattens the world into this infinite, blinding landscape.
And you can just feel how this light strips away all the normal meaning from things. A totally ordinary street scene becomes bizarre, alien. People look like ants, cars are just moving without purpose. Everything feels frozen in this state of extreme tension, like the whole world is holding its breath before a catastrophe. The ordinary becomes profoundly, deeply unreal.
All right, so after that total sensory flood, what about the actual physics of this new world? Well, it turns out the fundamental rules of our reality, time and space, they start to operate in a completely different way.
So first up, let's talk about time. We experience time as chronos, a straight line moving from past to future. But in this state, time becomes chronos. It's a circle. It doesn't move forward, it just revolves around a single, unmoving cosmic point. Everything that happens has already happened, and it's all going to happen again. It's a loop.
And space? It goes through a pretty similar transformation. It stops being this neutral external grid that we all share. It becomes a subjective, lived space where everything is defined by you. Imagine that north, south, east, and west aren't fixed points on a compass, but directions that only exist in relation to you, standing right at the center of your own private map.
So, what happens to logic? Well, it flips into something called dethinking. Instead of A leads to B leads to C, it's this rapid-fire associative process. Everything connects to everything else, and each connection is intensely meaningful. These connections, they aren't argued, they just are. They're obvious, powerful, and absolutely true.
So let's put this together. You're in a world where time is a circle. Space is centered entirely on you, and every random thought or image is packed with profound meaning. What happens? A pretty powerful conviction starts to form. You are not just a passive observer. You are the main character in a grand cosmic script. And this right here is the absolute key. In this world, there is no such thing as chance. The random way a bird flutters by, an annoying fly buzzing in the room, the way a stranger looks at you, it all becomes a deliberate sign. Every single tiny detail is a clue in a massive, unfolding story that is written for and about you.
This whole experience, often called the plan, has some really distinct features. It feels like you're in a game, or maybe a test, and you are the star player. And everyone else, from strangers on the bus to forces in the cosmos, they're all internet. They're fellow actors in the play. And the stakes couldn't be higher. It often feels like the fate of the entire world is resting on your shoulders.
Wow, this quote really brings home just how chillingly real it is to live inside the plan. The world basically splits in two. There are the people who are in on the secret, and then there's everyone else. A simple shared glance with a stranger who happens to be wearing the same color coat becomes absolute proof that you're part of a secret, silent alliance.
So, where does this leave us? What are we supposed to make of all this? Is it just a breakdown, or is there something deeper going on? Because what's really fascinating is how this entire altered reality shares some striking similarities with another profound human experience: mysticism.
The echoes throughout history here are just amazing. You have the ancient pursuit of union with the One, that sudden, life-changing revelation of fire that Pascal had, the whole idea of the ineffable, something that can't be spoken. These experiences, described by mystics and philosophers for centuries, have some uncanny resemblances to the world of madness we've been walking through. A core idea you find in both madness and mysticism is this total collapse of boundaries. The line between your inner world of thoughts and the outer world of things you see just dissolves. So to see something is to understand it. To understand it is to think it. And to think it is to exist as that thing. Yourself and the world around you literally become one. And this leads to a central part of the experience, this powerful feeling of living in two worlds at the same time. You've got the everyday, mundane world that everyone else sees. But layered over it, or maybe behind it, there is a second, greater reality, a world where everything is connected and it all finally makes perfect sense.
So what is the difference then? This quote, I think, offers a really powerful idea. Maybe the key difference between the mystic and the person experiencing madness isn't the vision itself, but how they frame it. The mystic sees it as poetry, right? As a metaphor for a deeper truth. But for the other, it's not a metaphor at all. It is literal, undeniable reality.
And that brings us to a final, pretty provocative question. If we can accept that madness isn't just chaos, but a world with its own coherent sense of time, its own space, its own logic, well, that kind of forces us to look back at our own reality, doesn't it? If another completely logical way of seeing the world is possible, then how can we be so sure, so absolutely certain, that ours is the only one that's real?